have representatives from the office of Honorable Ludivina D, Honorable Isang, Honorable Potot, Honorable Dep't, Chair of and Honorable President representative here. We have our representatives from regional office of our Department of Budget. Wala ba yung names nila? Other names? Ma'am, ano yung pwede kong malaman just for the record, yung ano po yung posisyon niyo kung sa regional office? Pag-red, pag-green, silent.
Hello, good afternoon po. I am Ludivina D. Potot. I am occupying the position of Chief Budget and Management Specialist in charge of all agencies in the province of Isabela. And I have here my Assistant Chief, Juliet T.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We're truly blessed and honored for you gracing this hearing for today. Truly, your presence here will truly be appreciated, especially with regard to your expertise regarding budgetary matters. So, based on our internal rules, as long as we have representatives from the offices of our members of this particular committee, I guess we can already consider this a forum. Committee on Good Governance, Public Accountability, and Ethics will now come to order. Would anybody like to start with a simple first prayer? If not, that's fine. Thank you. So let's try and say one time. Maganda pong hapon po sa inyo lahat. Maraming salamat po sa pagdalo niyo dito. Ang committee po ng Good Governance, Public Ethics, and Accountability ay napag-isipan magpatawag po ng isang public hearing upang malinawan po at maibigay alam po natin sa ating mga kababayan ang napaka-importanteng usapin tungkol po sa pondo. Lahat po ng ating mga proyekto, yung mga pondo po ng ating opisina, papasweldo po sa ating mga kawanin ng gobyerno, ay dito po nang gagaling at dapat din po siguro sa mga releasing systems natin sa ating tamang paglalabas o pag-allocate ng mga pondo ay dapat ito ay sang-ayon po sa ating mga batas. Sang-ayon po sa ating konstitusyon, sang-ayon din po sa mga national statutes governing certain local government funding, and of course our local government code. Ito po ay isang napaka-komplikadong usapin, kaya kung maaari, let's try to simplify it so that ang mga manonood po nito ay maintindihan po nila ng lubusan nang sa kanila ay maintindihan nila kung saan napupunta ang pera at bakit para tila wala silang nararamdaman mga pag-implement ng mga proyekto at nagkakaroon ng finger pointing. Yan naman ang pinaka-ayaw po natin mangyari sapagkat obligasyon naman bilang isang halal na opisyal na talagang pambanan ng tungkulin na talagang pantayan ng budget. Yan naman talaga ang ating the power of the purse, if I'm not mistaken, resides within the local legislature as it has been already delegated to us from Congress. Therefore, although the budget preparation emanates from our local chief executives and his offices, it must undergo the scrutinization of our local legislature, if I'm not mistaken. Tama naman po yun, di ba? And meron kasing mga nakaugalian o nakagawian natin mga pag-iisip na minsan nakakalimutan po natin ang iba't ibang mga obligasyon ng bawat opisyal na paghahalo. Na minsan yung konsehal, piling nila dapat ito ang gawin, pero this is the responsibility of actually the local chief executive. Nagkakabaliktad po. And this whole endeavor is actually to help educate not just those working within the local government, but also to inform the general public para po nalalaman nila at nakikita nila kung saan talaga napupunta ang kanilang pera. Kasi nagmumula lahat yan sa kanila. Marami na akong natatanggap. I have personal experiences. Not that I'm faulting anyone here because, you know, this is a phenomenon wherein it has taken a life of its own, wherein you really can't blame anyone except the system itself. And the best we can do is try to collaborate and try to work together to try and find a reasonable solution here. So maraming pong salamat sa pagdalo dito. Basically, I wanted to discuss 3 issues here. As I was mentioning before I called this hearing to order, we had a special session with regard to Executive Order 181, which was the order to release, subject to availability of funds, productivity enhancement incentive for all government employees or those who had employee-employer relationship with the LGU and whose salaries or wages are derived from that particular fund from salaries and wages, which is 701. Is that what they call it? 705. Sorry? 705 and 701. Now, this was actually debated lengthily on the floor during that special session, and I presented to the body at that particular time my personal opinion and what we reviewed on and how it was to be construed. Because if you look at section 2 thereof of PO 181, you will notice section 2 sub letter A, civilian personnel occupying regular, contractual, or casual positions, whether appointed or elective, on full-time or part-time basis, provided they have an employer-employee relationship with the agencies concerned and whose compensation are charged against personnel services appropriations. Okay. Based on that particular provision, you would notice that it is very specific and clear that aside from the regular contractual and casual positions, they also made reference to other particular situations wherein on the face it may not necessarily seem that they are regular or what are planilla positions. However, by the fact that they perform certain duties and obligations required by them as if they were regular employees, such a status is actually given to them by virtue of substantive law and also further held in a Civil Service Commission case where it was appealed, wherein a certain attorney Talo was provided or given such status despite the nature of the contract that he entered into. I think they held that it is really actually the control test and the supervision that the agency actually holds over the person. And this was actually applied here. Alam naman po natin, naintindihan naman po natin na meron po tayong tinatawag na JO na talagang pakyawan. Na yan, wala po talagang employer-employee relationship. And yan dapat yung mga ganyan klaseng mga JO, hindi po talaga entitled sa mga ganyan po mga pribileyo. Yan po ay malinaw. Pero ang pinaglalaban po natin dito ay ang mga special situated personnel na medyo hindi naman karapat-dapat napipilitan sila na maging o sumunod sa mga antas ng mga regular employees. They perform the same functions as compared to that of a plantilla position. And their salaries, their wages are actually derived from 701 and 705. Hence, they should also fall under subsection A and should not be interpreted and should not be deemed as the regular pakyawan or job order contracts. Ito po yung kunyari, yung opisina. Yung mga opisina kailangan ipagawa. Alright? Mag-hire tayo ng mga tauhan, mga empleyado, or someone, i-contract natin ang kanilang serbisyo para doon lang sa proyekto na yun. Ayun, walang employee-employee relationship yun. Pero kapag naman meron naman tayo mga staff na halos 80% na magmumula din dito sa Sangguniang Lungsod, ay puro mga contract of services, ngunit ang kanilang mga obligasyon, ang kanilang mga ginagawa sa araw-araw na nandito sila, ay walang pinagkaiba. Walang pinagkaiba sa ginagampanan ng ating mga regular plantilla. Pangalawa, sila ay subjected to controls such as thumbprint, biometric recognition. They are required to wear uniforms. They are required to adhere to whatever employee handbook that our LGU has. And they're treated no differently than that of a regular plantilla employee. Eh, iba naman, yan naman siguro ang tinutukoy nito. Kasi meron nga talagang ganung klaseng sitwasyon. And I'm pretty sure, although we will always submit to the, to the opinion of the Department of Budget, because this is what is actually mentioned here in this particular EO, in cases of situations where there is unclear interpretations, or there are several, a certain a request for a legal opinion should be directed immediately to the Department of Budget. And under my understanding, I believe that all local budgetary matters, the final arbiter there is the regional office, and you don't go straight to the main office. I was informed by actually attorney Paul who works at the legal at Amin, who happens to be she's related to me because she's the wife of my cousin. So that was one issue that we would like to clarify with our DBM regional. Prior to this meeting, it is unfortunate na wala po ang ating mga head ng ating mga budget at accounting offices. This would have been a great opportunity for us to actually, sit down together, collaborate, and find a solution to the challenges that we are facing. Because baka po, it might be misinterpreted, hindi po ako, I am not trying to do this in any vindictive or it's not politically motivated. Nalulungkot lang po talaga ako kasi nakikita ko na nahihinayan ako sa laki ng pondo na napupunta po sa ating syudad at nakikita ko na natatali, nadetenga dito sa mga ganitong klase, hindi naman dapat sana. And this is so contradictory to what President Aquino has been trying to, and of course Secretary Juliet has been trying to resolve. And in one of the first cities, in my own hometown, we seem to be facing problems that should not necessarily be deemed as one. Katulad na sinabi ko, hindi naman po dapat porkit ito ay natagawian o nakasanayan po natin gawin, ay automatic po tama na kaagad. Para mo nang sinabing nakasanayan ng isang tao na magmura kapag may kausap ng mga tao o may nakasanayan na tao na mambastos ng mga kapwa, sa kanila nakasanayan na nilang gawin yun. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. We still are governed by laws. We still have an obligation to provide the services needed by our constituents, and if we fail to allow ourselves, or if we fail to have the courage to try and find out what the real score is, then we would be remiss of our duties and obligations as public servants. Ayoko naman po magtalumpati, pasensya na po dahil baka nasobrahan ng aking mga sinasabi. Perhaps ma'am, if we could kindly request for your comments with regard to this, and if you could also set for the record that as of today, you have not received any formal communication or request from our LGU as to providing us with a legal opinion as regard to the proper distribution or disbursement of enforcement of Executive Order 181. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon again. Ang ganda-ganda po na sinabi ni Sir, ano? So, he fully understood the intent of PO 181. And first, maganda yung pag-compare niya sa nature of appointment ng mga tao versus those people hired under the full-time Pacquiao contract. But insofar as DBM is concerned, we just have a simple explanation of that by interpreting the rule on who is not entitled to PEI. Okay, let's not try to forget about the phrase charge against personnel services appropriations, because that is our main basis on measuring if the employee is under an employer-employee relationship with the LGU or not. Okay? So if the salaries and wages and other benefits of an employee who was hired by the LGU is charged from personal services appropriation, that means they are under employer-employee relationship with the LGU Santiago. Okay, other than that, if it is charged from non-personal services, they are deemed considered on the other side. Okay, so walang pagbabasehan kundi yung kontrata lang na kanilang pinirmahan nung services nila ay nakuha ng ating LGU. Okay, yun po ang isang main. Bakit kinakailangan may syllabulation? Ang budget component po kasi ay merong tatlo, personnel services, pangalawa, MOOE, at pangatlo, capital outlay. Okay? Yung lahat ng tao na kung saan ang kanilang sahod ay nakukuha sa personnel services, ibig sabihin, they are insiders. Okay? Pero kapag sila naman ay sa labas lang, kumbaga, their services were hired on a temporary basis or because of some piece of work that should be done, that cannot be done by the regular employees, kinukuha po yung sahod nila sa MOOE. That means expenses po siya. So, hindi siya personal services. Okay. So, clear naman po yun. I am not really sure kasi po kung ano po yung nature ng appointment ng mga involved personnel that you think in this August body should be entitled to PEI or not. So I guess it's only the LGU that can really clarify the matter if they are under employer-employee relationship or not.
Thank you so much, Amin, for that explanation, because we were actually debating on this very thoroughly as to what this actually meant, and hearing this from you actually makes me feel, I guess you could say, a bit vindicated. Actually, for example, my office alone, all of my staff complement are under a contract of service per se. However, they are performing regular tasks that required of my office in order for it to perform its official functions. All of them are required to submit to the control of, well, of course, of myself and of course our administrative head, Vice Mayor Kabuhana, and they're made to log in using the biometrics. So I think it's pretty clear that although the contract may not and it even may state that there is no employer-employee relationship, but it's not really the face of the contract itself, but actually what the person is doing and what that person is actually, and this has been held in cases, several cases already, and has been also, the exception has already also been made by the CSE in that position of Kalo, wherein, in spite of what the contract said, because of him having to represent the LGU, or if not any sub-agency thereof performing official functions, they would actually have to deem him or actually accredit him as having an employer-employee relation. And also, we also have on record that all of our JO or contract of service personnel, the funding is all derived from our personal services, which is 701. So then I think that would fall under that. Aside from those who are also affected or who have yet to receive this particular benefit are our DPOS agents. Now these are, these DPOS agents, mahirap naman sabihin pakyawan lang sila because they are maintaining peace and order. How can you consider them as a persons who have no employer-employee relationship wherein they are enforcing the ordinances that the Sanggunian have actually passed or enacted? So we have here a list, and all those, and actually during that particular deliberation or during my interpolation on that particular day, I also provided that particular list of all those who are not part of the plantilla, who are also casual plantilla but have not been provided or entitled to the pay. And indeed, or I've been wanting to exhaust all administrative remedies, which is why I called also for this, so that we can actually ask for an official opinion coming from the DBM, if not. And after talking, or after speaking with the head of our HRM, Mr. Carrion, I asked him point blank, if, for example, all of our JOs or all of our CS personnel would suddenly disappear or decide not to go to work, would that actually place our LGU at a standstill and incapacitate our ability to deliver basic services? And he categorically answered as yes. And we have that on the record. I will be providing you with a copy thereof. There seems to be a misunderstanding as to how we can actually work together and come up with a viable budget that can be implemented according to this GAA. And these are just some of the many things that I've noticed that perhaps you could shed more light upon and then properly inform us and the general public kung ano ang dapat po namin gawin, ano pong dapat mga corrections na dapat namin gawin para mag-guide po kami accordingly, and we can move forward and actually provide good governance. So, what would be our next step po? That already being said, should the Sanggunian then request formally, instead of our local chief executive through the Department of Budget, we, the Sanggunian as a body request for a DBM opinion with regard to this, or how would we go about that now?
Okay, before I answer that, sir, let me just try to give some emphasis here on the use of the word job order. Okay, kumbaga parang kung ako po kasi ang babasa sa mga sinabi, mag-iintindi. Based sa civil service policies, yung kind of appointment are the following: permanent, temporary, casual, at saka contractual lang. These 4 appointments are generally charged from personal services appropriation. So wag po, kung sana po, isuggest ko lang po na wag natin gawin or sabihin job order. Kasi kung ang job order, kung pwede lang sir ha, ang job order lang po kasi sa ating dialect is pakyawan, for a piece of work lang. So after yung completion of that piece of work, after it has been delivered or completed, that's it, that's the end. Kaya hindi natin sinasabing may employer-employee relationship. Kumbaga pang matagalan po kasi yung apat na appointment na yun, except of course for contractual, we would cease on a certain period of time, maybe a year or so. Okay? So kumbaga, suggestion ko lang sir, kasi parang kung ako umiintindi, yung sinasabi po ba ninyo na job order are actually, are they, you're saying, sir, they are doing regular functions?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay. Yung appointment po ba nila has been evaluated or reviewed by civil service?
Here's the situation. Like also in the example that under the case of Kalo, under the civil service appeal decision, because of how the contract itself was entitled, it was automatically deemed that, so it went straight to the COA. Right, so, but in reality, if you would look further into it, like for the obligations and contracts, although it may say that this is a real estate mortgage, but in reality, it's really only a deed of assignment. Even no matter how many times you write, this is a real estate mortgage, but the main bulk is really a deed of assignment, then it's a deed of assignment. Ganun po ata ang nangyari dito. For convenience sake siguro, kasi nakasanayan dito po sa LGU natin na tawagin JO or joke only. Mga JO or CS ang mga magigiting nating sanggunian pangunsod na empleyado at doon din sa ating local chief executive branch naisama na sila sa isang poll. Ito yung sinasabi ko, baka nga we can correct this because I can vouch and I can swear, I can attest that these people are actually performing regular functions. They are made to follow the employee-employer handbook. We can give you a copy, provide you with a copy of the contracts and everything. And I'm very confident that it will show and prove that they've been here. Actually, all of my staff have been here from day one. This is, I'm just speaking for my own office. Maraming mga dipos at mga ibang basurero po namin which have been actually working with our LGU for more than 10 years, and yet they are still deemed as contractual, which is sad, and it's something that we need to address, and it's something that we need to properly associate, because I really feel that we set a very dangerous precedent here. It sets a bad example, especially for the private sector. Kung nagagawa po ng ating local government ang labagyan ng mga karapatan ng mga tao na nagtatrabaho, it sets a very dangerous precedent para po sa ating local private sector na ikinon kayo nag-aano kayo why should we follow what you're trying to implement here? Good leadership needs to start by setting the right example, and we will be all hypocrites here if we do not follow that kind of tenor. Again, I really, as much as possible, I don't want to rock, but there's really no choice. I really have to find a situation, and I made a promise to these people that if they deserved it and if it is well within the ambit of the law, then we should fight for it. So this is one of the things that we would like to address. If you could, thank you. So right now, I guess the proper term would be temporary contractual. That would be the proper term for them? So let this be taken note for the record. We should stop. It's the same thing we're in our session. It's no longer what is our agenda, right? It's actually what the order of business. It may seem trivial to most people, pero if we really try and understand the nuances of the language that we use, we will come to see that every word means something very distinctly different. It's like in law you have adultery and concubinage. Akala ko parehas na ang haliwa, pero magkaiba talaga yun. Diba? Adultery can only be committed by the female spouse, but concubinage can only be committed by the male spouse. So, although it may seem the same, it's actually different. So, thank you so much because we really appreciate you clarifying that, and at least now we will set that for the record, and I'll probably have to file a resolution a resolution in Santiago's to that, or in this committee report that we will be submitting. So, for the record, would it be, can we already say that based on our explanation and the documentation that we will be providing our office and the formal request that a opinion with regard to this particular matter, would it be safe to say that yung mga ganong klaseng mga contractual or mga ganong klaseng temporary employees na ang kanilang sweldo ay nakukuha sa ating personal services ay dapat din nakimbiyan sila ng itong sinasabing productivity enhancement incentive.
Okay, para nakikita ko kung saan ano yung problema talaga. And I do believe that it is always the LGU itself that can solve the problem. And especially or particularly the head of the HR as well as the head of budget office should try to study further itong problema ito. Kasi they can give you much important information so that the LGU would be able to come up with a decision that, oh, ito palang mga employee ito ay entitled sa PEI. Okay? Now, kung yan ma-resolve within the LGU, hindi na magiging problema. Okay? Ang magiging problema would be what would be the next step to do? First is, of course, kung aminado na po ang LGU na itong mga employee, how do we call? Sila na lang, general na lang, itong employee ito, mga empleyado na ito, ay entitled to PEI, then it would be incumbent upon the LGU now to look for funds. Okay? So that they would be paid PEI also. Okay? And this initiative should come from the local chief executive, from the executive branch. Kasi wala naman tayo magagawa kundi tapos ng annual budget. We cannot change that anymore. But we are now trying to change the annual budget because there is this need now to pay, for the LGU to pay the PEI of these employees. So maghanap po ng pondo at of course, mag-initiate ang executive for the enactment or mag-propose, that's a better term, mag-propose ng budget for enactment by the Sangguniang for such purpose, payment of the PEI of these employees.
Thank you. What if there are actually funds that are available and ready to be paid? Or for example, because I noticed here in this particular executive order that it isn't actually necessary that the funds are actually there, but it can be paid out on a tranche basis, as indicated here. And also, aside from that, in case of there aren't enough savings or funds available, they could be entitled to a minimum of 5,000 pesos instead of the actual 1 month equivalent. What if there's a computation, there's actually an availability of such funds, and although I understand that this has to emanate from the local chief executive, is this not 181 already self-executory and merely something which is ministerial on the part of the LGU? Because that's my understanding of it.
Ganito lang yan, sir. Let's not try to forget the section there, EO 181. Yung kailan ba magbayad dapat ang entity ng PEI ng empleyado. Ang isang sinabi dyan is, kailangan po yung entity ay passer of the good financial housekeeping under the SGLG program of the DILG. Okay? Yun ang una natin tingnan. Kasi nabanggit ni Sir, kung kulang ang pondo, pwede bang 5,000 lang ang ibibigay? I believe ang sinasabi ng EO 181 is teka muna. Okay. Kung kulang ang pondo, it is always fair to say that the benefit can be paid on a lower rate at a uniform basis.
Across the board.
Okay? So it may not be necessarily be equivalent to 5,000.
So it will actually be
Kasi
less
yung
or
5,000 po kasi sir
it's
is
the main standard.
standard for those who did not comply to the GFH requirement of the DILG.
Did we pass? Are we
I guess you did, sir. Kasi you're implementing the BUP project. So, sir, going back to that one, paano kung kulang yung pondo? So, yun po ang sagot. Always fair po dapat tayo at a lower rate at uniform percentage. Hindi pwede yung 50% sa isa, 60% yung isa. That's unequal. Okay? Ngayon, tanong ni sir kung pwede bang, ano ba itong savings or funds actually available? The local finance committee can always clear the matter. Kasi sila po ang tumutulong at nag-identify kung ano ang available funds. Kapag ang treasurer also can certify as to the availability of funds. So tanong ni sir, is it actual ba na cash ang dapat meron? Okay, ang sagot po dun sir is dapat actually back up by cash because it is a one-time grant. Okay?
Thank you so much. The reason why we're going through this, para po naintindihan din ng mga ating mga epektado po nito kasi kailangan malinaw na pinapaliwanag sa kanila, step by step. Thank you so much for bearing with us and answering these questions. Para po pagdating ng pagkatapos itong meeting na ito o itong hearing na ito, malinaw din sa kanila, okay, ito pala ang kailangan. Para hindi rin sila mag-iisip na bakit binigyan, pala binigyan, magkakaroon ng gulo, magkakaroon ng political color to that. And that's not what we want. We just want to give everyone their due and what they actually deserve. So, ito ang system, sinasabi. I really wish that we had somebody from our budget to attend. I will try and appeal, but at least we have this for the record. One more time, we'll try to set that. Ang magiging problema kasi, hindi na isasagot ng tama or parang meron silang inaantay na go signal na nagmumula po sa hindi ko talagang masasabi. But what happened here was 10 million pesos was certified for the release of the PEI. And that 10 million said it was for savings. And I was trying to ask, how did they come up with that? The savings from which particular fund are we going to be getting this from? And at that particular point in time, that question was not properly answered. It was answered by a statement which was made that the mayor is open to other opportunities or other situations wherein lahat mabibigyan ng ganitong klase. Kailangan ng kumuha ng go signal sa kanya. In a situation such as that, can it not be also at the initiative of the Sanggunian to enact a particular ordinance authorizing that particular release? Must it always originate from the local chief executive? are we then now powerless as the guardians of, or the power of the purse, not to create an ordinance and have it passed and have these funds distributed as it was intended?
Okay, yeah, the power of the purse is within the legislative. But that can only be exercised, sir, if the local chief executive or the executive branch had submitted, have proposed something for funding. Okay. If my memory serves me right, the only instance where the legislative can enact an ordinance for such purpose is when the funds come from savings of their own appropriation. Okay? And that savings should be used for augmenting some items of the same expense class. So if I may illustrate it briefly, kung yung savings na yun have been generated from MOOE, the same savings should be used for MOOE.
Hindi pwedeng cross.
Hindi pwedeng
bawal po yun.
pataas o bababa. Otherwise, Section 321 of the code would apply, and that would mean appropriating an ordinance authorizing the enactment of a supplemental budget.
And this is when the funds are actually returned to the general fund, and this is right, and it's a reprogram by supplemental budget. So that's actually allowed. Yan ang pwede sana. Hindi yung pwede yung shortcut na lang tayo, gumawa ng savings, tapos gagawin pang PS o pang PS, gagawin pang MOE. Yun ang marami salamat po. At yun ang gusto ko matagal ko na talagang ina-emphasize. Apparently, this is what has been the general practice from years before, which I would like to recorrect. Now that we have a categorical answer and this is very clear, I'm very thankful that this has actually been clarified. So, for the record, hindi po tayo pwede hindi natin, ito yung sinasabi ko, hindi natin pwede, yung sinasabi nyo rin po, we cannot call a JO employee a JO kung talagang he's a contractual employee. Ito rin, hindi mo rin pwede tawagan realignment at isang bagay kung hindi naman siya realignment. It's actually a supplemental or something. Use of savings, the proper savings. Another question is, napag-uusapan na rin po natin ang ating savings. How do we determine something to be deemed as savings? Because there are situations wherein, due to unforeseen circumstances, whether it be intentional or not, the implementation of a particular project, the implementation of a particular project is actually delayed or it is not actually started or completed on. I've been receiving text messages. This is the state of our LGU, and I will state this for the record. Some projects, because they're not probably implemented because there's a failure with regard to the Bids and Awards Committee to come up with, to actually approve any of those who apply. And dahil nasa katagalan, just for an example, just for a supply contract, it's already been 1 year and 8 months. And because of the failure to bid, or there was a failure in the bidding process, and nobody wants to bid, nakatenga lang itong particular project na to. And this is really unacceptable. Nararamdaman na rin ng tao, and I'm sure our Honorable Mayor is also frustrated on his end because yung mga ibang gusto niyang proyekto ay hindi rin niya nagagawan. At ang nangyayari, ang nasisisi, ang sanggunian. Kasi ayaw daw namin. Hindi naman sa ayaw namin. Bisa na-approve na nga namin. Hindi lang na-implement kasi nga hindi na-award hindi na igawa yung tamang sistema na magkaroon ng proper bidding process o idaan sa JEPs. Ganun talaga ang katotohanan. Ganun ang nangyayari. Hindi po nanggagaling sa sanggunian. And I think I'm safe to speak on behalf of all of my colleagues from the sanggunian that in no way are we trying to block or try to hinder any implementation of any valid project. And I have to say valid because hindi rin naman namin pwedeng aprubahan ang isang proyekto na wala pang plano. There have been, some complaints that we are against certain projects, but in reality, it's not that we are against it, it's we're still waiting for the necessary documentation which is required. And I think we would be guilty of failing to perform our mandate to ensure that these are worthwhile projects. I mean, it's the essence, the foundation of good governance. It's our obligation to enact ordinances or approve ordinances that are actually sustainable. Eh kung hindi naman natin nakikita na sustainable ito at malulubog lang tayo sa mas malalim na balon, eh ba't pa natin gagawin yan, di ba? So I think this has been pretty much addressed. One of the other things that actually came to my attention was an offshoot of this particular thing was if we could go to our appropriations for salaries under the Sanggunian Panunsod. This is actually our official annual budget, which was approved, which was enacted and approved, and yan po ang ayan, okay. Base po sa ating GA, yan po ang dinaan po na budget, personal services, para po sa bawat opisina ng miyembro ng Sanggunian Panunsod. Ano ba yun? That's not the one. Okay, that's 701, that's 8 million, but let's do the line by the line item. Ano yung mga positions nito? Available. Just to give a backstory, when I assumed my first term in 2013 of July, it was July, it was midterm, so there was already an existing reenacted budget, so we had to follow whatever. And this was explained to me at that time by Vice Mayor Kabuhana, that we would have to wait, and then at least by the time our 2014 budget would come, we would properly appropriate what was due to each and every office. Now, here's the thing. After speaking with Vice Mayor Kabuhana, the whole scenario would change when we would submit our request, because I would be informed that there was not enough funds available under personnel wages